Greetings, New Hammer, Middle Hammer, and Old Hammer folks alike. I am Old Grumpy Wolf, aka Lennon Midnight, and welcome to the Minibar Podcast. I'll be serving you up lots of awesome painting nerdiness, talking to other painters from around the web. And tonight at the bar, we have a very special guest with us. Tactical Painter, aka Adam, I believe, who is the owner of Army Painter US.
No, not quite.
Head honcho.
I am the tactical marketing executive, but a lot of us are very fortunate to become owners in the business, which is really, really awesome. I get to say I'm an owner in the Army Painter, and so do a lot of the people that work there, which is amazing.
Okay. Really quick, like, are you using your camera's mic, or are you actually using an external mic?
I'm using this guy right here.
Okay, move that a little bit closer to your face because it keeps auto compressing.
My bad. Sorry. So that's what makes it hard to hobby while I do these things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess we'll just deal with it because it was kind of going in and out. But anyway, so it's nice to actually have a U.S. guest on because normally I've got people from Europe, so it's like 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning when I do these. So it's like, oh, it's only 5 o'clock. It means I get to have an evening. Whereabouts in the U.S. are you?
So I am outside of New Orleans, Louisiana, in a town called Abita Springs. So if you hear some clanging in the background, my kids are just getting back from dance class.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So apologies. I might have one of them come running in here with a tantrum, but...
Are your kids? I can't talk. Are your kids interested in the painting stuff that you do?
Yeah. So my youngest, I have some of these like minotaurs from what's the game called? Parabellum's Conquest.
Okay.
And she's painted on 2 of them, and they sit in my windowsill. And she asks every day if she can finish painting. My daughter has painted. My other daughter has painted a bunch. I have a. One sec. My first ever entry into Golden Demon was actually just an HQ piece for an orc army that I started and then gave to Kat, who is the head of our events program.
Oh yeah, I met her.
You did.
Yeah.
That's right, at LVO. I kept it because on the back, it's got this skull, and my daughter was, I think, 2 at the time, maybe just a little bit under. And I was sitting here painting it, and she's like, "Skeleton." So I couldn't give it up. It means something, and I ended up just kind of submitting it into Golden Demon by Thomas, my colleague at the Army Painter's suggestion, and it's pretty fun.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was digging through your Instagram, and I noticed that you did quite a few Golden Demon entries, which is really cool. I'm actually quite jealous because my gal and I are going we're going next year to Adepticon, and I've dreamed of entering Golden Demon since I was a wee lad of like 10, 11 years old. So it'll be kind of a dream come true 33 years later.
Same. The funny thing is, it's been 2 years that I've entered, and the first year I just submitted pieces that I had no intent in entering. Mm-hmm. I did because, like I said, Thomas was like, just throw something that you painted for one of your armies in. This year I went and spent a couple days with Sam Lenz, who's one of our factory team members, one of my favorite painters in the world, and Thibaut, who took home a couple Golden Demons this year. And I started a mini on Monday with the intent on finishing it to enter it into Golden Demon, and I did, and I stayed up really late on Friday trying to finish it because I made mistakes, and as you do. I brought a Space Marine because I knew I could paint that at least to a level in a day and a half that I'd be fine to put that in the booth, or in the showcase. But Sam was like, "No, you're not doing a Space Marine. Build this." So I did a Dark Oath Free Rider, and I am going to. I've already resculpted one. It's actually sitting right here. I was playing with it, putting some basing stuff on there. Made it super long spear because spears are great and it looks really cool. I'm going to basically repaint it with some other things and enter it next year. So I've got big plans for Golden Demon this upcoming year.
I do need to say thank you for like making green stuff so easily accessible. I bought a pack of your green stuff, I think last year. And yeah, my green stuff from the 2000s finally just dried out when I dug it out. So thank you for making it so easily accessible again.
You're welcome.
Does GW even still make green stuff? Yeah. Oh, really?
I think so. So the actual name is Neatitite, right?
Oh, okay.
So it's not like a trademark thing. But yeah, there's a lot of companies make blue and yellow 2-part epoxy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because all I've seen floating around at like different stores here in town is just the liquid green stuff they make, the filler.
I think that. So honestly, I think that is just a heavy body acrylic paint.
Yeah, I kind of figured.
Yeah, I don't think it's. Maybe it is, but I don't know. I mean, most acrylic paints use an acrylic resin binder,
Mm-hmm.
so I mean there's an element of resin to it. So I mean it does the job.
Well, you couldn't really have like a 2-part or like epoxy in a pot for it to stay active because it's a chemical based activating
bond.
Agent.
Right. Yeah. So, I've started experimenting. So like green stuff is great for certain things. Mm-hmm. I've started experimenting with other stuff. We're always playing, and you asked me actually at the beginning of the show about using other brands. I mean, we're always trying different stuff and always learning from it. Mm-hmm. I've been using a product, actually a recommendation from John Nenes, Ninjon, called Epoxy Sculpt. And I would love if we did something similar to it because it's so easy to use. It's like all of the benefits of green stuff and Milliput mixed in one.
Oh, okay.
And it sets a little faster than both, in my opinion, and it's less messy. Yeah, it's. I'd love to do something. I've told Thomas. So Thomas is now the head of our product development officially, and I was like, "You got to try this stuff. It's awesome."
I have one suggestion for a product I'd love to see from you guys that I think would be a huge hit. Make brush caps. Like, the plastic tips you guys ship the brushes with, that everyone ships their brushes with. Make those so you can buy them as a standalone product. Because everybody, lots of people
tunnels
use them.
And stuff like that.
What's that?
For like tunnels and like basing, or here we go. Oh, just
the plastic cap.
Yeah, but
sell packs of those
just to have extras laying around.
Yes, because a lot of people lose them.
Okay.
And like I thought, if you didn't notice, with my brush caps, I've actually started painting colored tips on them. So like, if you have white carpet in your house or you're somewhere that has like a lighter colored floor, if you drop it on the floor, you can immediately see it. But
funny story.
Uh-oh.
So this miniature, I wanted to put antlers on it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's got the chieftain mask, the devil mask thing. And I was going to put antlers on it because I thought, like, how much cooler could this be if it had antlers on the mask? So I bought, I can't remember what it was. It was one of the like kill teams or Warcry units, and it had a guy that had antlers. Clipped the first one, vanished.
It became
Just
part of the
vanished.
carpet.
Right? So I clip the other one, save it. It'll show up. I've looked everywhere. I employed my oldest daughter to come help me. Couldn't find it. And then I had to mess around and like reset up my desk. Mm-hmm. And you see the acoustic foam in the back, right there.
Oh God.
Remember that little, it was stuck and wedged in between the acoustic panel.
That's awesome.
And I had already gotten, well, I didn't get rid of it, but it went into the bits bin, and the thing was already assembled. So, oh well, no antlers. Bummer.
That will never happen again in a million years. No matter how hard you try, it will never happen again.
Next time, the first place I'm looking is not going to be the floor; it's the wall.
Oh yeah, that's sound deadening foam. It'll pick up little bits like that pretty easily.
Yeah. Now I wonder what else is in there. I should go just treasure hunting.
So actually, just to get into the show. The first question I always ask everybody who comes on.
Let's talk about lost bits some more, though. Like, why? We need to get in the show. I'm sorry, I'm kidding.
What got you into the hobby of miniature painting?
When I was about 11 years old, I went and my cousins were living in upstate New York, And I went up there and we were reading Lord of the Rings and playing Legos. We built Middle Earth out of Legos in the basement.
Oh, nice.
I was the elves. Alex was the humans, and little Toki J. J. Abrams Miniature Art. He's on Instagram.
Oh, okay.
He was the orcs, of course, because he was the youngest of all of us. And I think our uncle took us to a mall, and it was either a Games Workshop store or it was a hobby store. And in the front glass, they had miniatures that were painted, and it was Warhammer, and it was Empire, it was Wood Elves, it was Orcs, and we're just like, this is it.
Yeah.
Uncle Dan, can we borrow some money? And we would paint, and when we'd meet up for holidays and summer vacation and stuff like that, we'd show off what we painted. We never played a game. And I dabbled in it off and on throughout high school, college, and actually didn't touch it for a long time. I was big into bike riding and cycling and starting my career. And my wife and I had gotten married, and just recently after we got married, I got back from a bike ride, and a friend of mine jumped into a pool, having beers post long Saturday bike ride with a pool noodle, and like yelled, "I'm a Bretonian knight." And it was the audible record scratch in your head. And I was like, "What did you just say?" And he's like, "Yeah, I've been playing Warhammer forever." And the next day I went to a Warhammer store and bought a box of towel and started all over again. And yeah, I've been there ever since. It's been about 15 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's kind of funny how that works. I've been in and out of it over like 30 years, and my longest break was from 2012 up until January of 24. And it's funny how like this thing that you get into like as a kid usually cements itself in your life pretty well, even like when you kind of go off the path to do something else because life gets in the way. It seems like a lot of people like from our generation are now really returning to it in full force. I constantly see profiles of people saying, back to painting Warhammer after a 20-year break, after a 15-year break. And it was really cool coming back because like when I left in 12, there was no old hammer scene. And coming back to it, it was like...
Because it was still old hammer then.
Yeah. Well, I think that was, what, 7th or 8th edition of 40K?
I think 12 was the end of 6th.
Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, 2nd edition was only 4 editions removed, and that wasn't... I mean, Old Hammer was, like, 1970s when GW started. But, coming back to it, it was like walking right back into the 90s again, seeing everybody, doing their thing. You got one of the biggest the couple of the biggest pushes for me were finding Louise from Rogue Hobbies, because like all of her content initially, she was very Old Hammer based. You had dudes like Goblin Green, you got Darren Latham, Snakeworks Studio, just all these guys into the Old Hammer stuff. And it was like, wow, this is still a thing. And then, me getting back into this, starting to put this stuff out, people were like, dude, wow, those are really good. And it was just nice to be part of this Old Hammer community. And then the new Hammer kids, I try to talk to them and they talk back to me. I'm like, what were the words that just came out of your mouth? Don't you mean Imperial Guard and Space Marines? Oh, no, Legion of Astartes and da-da-da. I'm like, I'm going to go hang out with the old people now.
Yeah. Get off my lawn, kid.
But it like with, seeing is you being you, it's really cool to see from the painter side. One of the biggest intimidation factors I faced coming back to painting was all my old Citadel paints from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s dried up. That room that's right behind me, that's my storage room. I had all my paints against the wall that the sun hits, so they all dried out. And coming back to painting, it was really difficult because there was so many varieties of paints. It was hard to, through the 90s and 2000s, you primarily just had Citadel. So
Citadel
that was really Vallejo was around, but everywhere in Vegas that I went, nobody had Vallejo. It was always Citadel color. So, that one mainstay was always there, but there was Citadel, there was Pro Acryl, there was Warpainter, there's AK, Too Thin Coats, all different brands, and it was intimidating getting back into it. So I started with Vallejo because it was very similar to what I was used to from the 80s and the 90s. But branching out and trying different paint brands, it's so cool that there's such a variety. And I mean, you being being part of Army Painter, thank you for making that variety available to us. There's, for me, I have different, all different paints now. And it's really cool that like one color may not work for you. So you go try the similar color from a different brand. You might find the behavior that works for that color and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's I think the interesting thing. And I, my expectation, because people ask me all the time, how is this industry going to, support all of these different paint brands? Mm-hmm. And the truth is it will, up until it's not viable anymore. Right? Yeah. The fact that there's more and more paint brands and some popping up left and right, it means that there's a demand out there. Yep. That's great. That means our industry is growing. But what I think it could potentially be the case, just like sporting equipment, running shoes, is that you'll start to see companies differentiate and lean into the characteristics that they want to promote more. Yeah. And I think that's the benefit, because paint at the end of the day is a tool. Yep. Just like a paintbrush, just like a file, tools work differently for different people and different techniques. We will always strive to make a product that can do as much as we think it can, because we have this focus on, the gamers, the hobbyists, always the beginners. We've always been very beginner focused, trying to bring people into the hobby. But now we're able to, with, the experts that we have working at the team, and the materials that we know how to use nowadays and have innovated, like our stabilizing equipment, like our war paints air, thinner and medium, like speed paint. We are able to do something with our products that is not only easy to use and accessible for the beginner, the gamer, the person who doesn't want to paint, they want to play, but also stands up for some of the best painters in the world. Yeah. One of my greatest points of pride is sending paints, the Fanatic, early samples to Sam to get his opinion, because you can go back. There's, I did an interview, I think for Faux Hammer, a long time ago, a few years ago. And they asked me like, who are some creators or artists that you want to work with? And Sam was right up there. I've always envied him, and I'm happy to today call him a friend and also support the work that he does through the factory team. But hearing from him that he was getting frustrated because he only had like 9 colors that we sent him. And when he was painting on projects, he had to go back to his P3 or Citadel or whatever he had, because we just didn't have that color at that point in time in development. Yeah. And he was mad that he didn't, because he wanted that color in Fanatic. That was like one of the biggest, proving moments that we were on the right track with what we were doing. Oddly enough, I'm not very good at non-metallic metal. Yeah. I would like to improve because I like the way it looks, but I reached out to somebody and I really liked their like dark tin, like old iron metal. And I was like, would you by any chance be able to just send me the recipe? I could play around, because I could find colors that match or are close. And he sent me a photo, and it was great to see that there were a couple Fanatic paints in there. Right. Oh, nice. So it's cool to see. We didn't send him that. He's not sponsored by us. He went out and got that himself, and that makes me incredibly happy. At the end of the day, like, that's the most rewarding thing, is finding out that the painters and gamers and hobbyists out there like our products enough to use them.
Well, I will say that, like, I have to say thank you for the two primaries that I use for my Space Wolves. That's Runic Cobalt and Frost Blue. And both of those are identical to Citadel's old, what they don't make anymore, their old Space Wolves gray and their old blue gray / I think they started calling it Shadow Gray in the 2000s. But I pulled out my old paint pots to compare them. It was like a couple weeks ago, just to make sure they were what I was thinking in my head, and they are an exact match. And you guys are the only paint line that makes those two colors exactly the way they're supposed to be.
I wish I could say that was intentional, but it wasn't.
Well,
I tested within our range. So
I tested anything close. I tested from AK, Pro Acryl, Citadel, and comparison to you guys. It was while I was in my local shop, and everybody's is like either too blue or too bright.
Yeah.
And yours, like I pulled the old Citadel paint pots from the 90s and the 2000s. They were still the same formula. They were just using a matte agent in the 2000s. But yeah, they're perfectly spot on. And your Angels green is perfect Dark Angels green from the 90s. Used to be, I think that was called originally Orc Flesh, and then they renamed it to Dark Angels green. But yeah, for old hammer dudes like me, there's certain colors that we want in our paints, and it's great that, again, variety, but also that, your paint line is huge, and you guys nail certain colors so perfectly. It's really nice to have the accessibility to that. And also, I like the fact that your paints layer glaze very easily. Like the amount of pigment that you guys put in them, layer glazing with them is just such a breeze for me. Like when I'm doing my Space Wolves and I'm doing them for competition level painting, you saw my Ulrich,
incredible.
Doing that. Citadel don't do that. It's like they lack pigment, and whatever acrylic medium they use, it's so gelish. And to me, I had the hardest time working with their current paint line. I was like, I got to go find something else. This just is not stirring the Kool-Aid.
I think that at the end of the day, we made a paint that we wanted to use that hit the marks that we wanted to. It is insanely pigmented, but there are also covering agents in there to help it cover better.
Yeah.
And the trick was balancing that out and making it so that, every paint range, and I just said this earlier today, I was on NEO Custom Miniatures Live, every paint range has its winners and losers.
Yeah.
Some are big winners, some are big losers, some are right in between. Mm-hmm. I believe that with Fanatic, what we were able to do is we were able to mitigate that margin, and the winners are a lot closer to the losers. There are no losers because they all perform very similarly.
Yeah.
If you're somebody who just wants to slap a coat on and, put a wash and start playing, they're great for that because you can paint faster with it because of the coverage. But as you said, layer glazing, especially when you use the pigmentless stabilizer to thin it, because that's the magic to the Fanatic range is that stabilizer. Now, when you add more to it, it disperses that pigment evenly. Yeah. So you could really stretch it, and you don't get the streaks, you don't get the catches that you do with other ranges and other colors because it's so uniform.
One thing I did want to say earlier when you were talking about how the industry works, like I've been running a brand for 18 years that's automotive based, and
I've seen your work. It's pretty cool.
The common misconception that a lot of people have, and not just in automotive, but like with like paints or gaming and stuff like that, they think that like all these brands hate each other and they're enemies and stuff. And it's like, no, like when Seymour comes to town or LVO, no, we all go out drinking afterwards. We're all going out to dinner afterwards. We're hanging out. It's a lot of fun. But also the great thing about having so many brands out there is that it forces innovation. And
competition breeds innovation.
Yeah, and for a market, like when you have a market that only has one or two leaders in it and nobody's competing against it, it becomes stagnant because there's no reason to 50-50, there's no reason to compete with each other.
That was this industry in 2005.
Yeah.
I mean, you had Citadel and you had Viejo, and they were the only two options. And Viejo was well known in the model and scale model and hobby industry, or I should say like historical industry.
Yeah.
And when people discovered it that were gamers, they were like, oh wow, there's this other thing that works for what we do. It was a big surprise, and that's why they had basically carte blanche to do whatever they wanted for 2 decades. And then a little company from Denmark starts knocking on their door, and 10 years later, they're a 7-person company. And 7 years after that, we're outselling both of them in a lot of stores, especially in North America. And I don't think it's just due to quality and performance of paints. I mean, that's one thing. You can make the best quality of anything, but if it's not available, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
So that's something that we take very seriously. It's you mentioned the green stuff earlier, like it's so accessible and easy to find. Well, if you don't have products to sell, then you're not making money.
Yep.
You don't have a business anymore, and your retailers that buy your product aren't making money, and your customers aren't happy because they take a trip. How upsetting is it when you take a trip to go get something and they're out of stock?
Yeah, that's a little
annoying. What I mean? like, oh, we just ran out. Like, well, crap.
Yeah.
It's the worst feeling in the world. I'd say when I used to be working, I used to split time between marketing and sales, and I would do these sales training seminars. The hardest bottle of paint for a retailer to sell is one that they don't have in stock.
Yep.
So, we take that seriously. And I think that is, yes, we've made a lot of moves in the community over the past, decade. But we couldn't have done it if we didn't have the backbone, the hard work, the sweat that was put in by Michael, Bo, and Jonas, building up retailers. Because at the end of the day, forget about, I love that there are online businesses out there. Of course we do. There's tons of them that sell our product. But game stores, brick and mortar game stores, are still the pillar of hobby in many communities. So one of the biggest recruitment tools, for our industry still. And we need to support them. So,
well, I mean, it's really a hobby that's, it's very tactile, it's very hands-on. So it's nice to see that the general consensus is still, finding your local store and going there for finding what local store works for you, and just, going there for your supplies and stuff like that, seeing the boxes of miniatures on the shelves, seeing the paint display case, having the paint racks with all the different brands where you can actually, like, I'll go in and when I'm looking for a color, I'll pop the cap off and daub a little bit on my hand just to test the colors, and, like, oh, okay, there, this is what I was looking for.
So you steal? Oh, dude. You submitted to stealing.
I steal a drop of paint. No, but it's still just a very tactile thing, and it's just nice that community still exists. Yeah. But before we go too much further, one big question I came up with a few for you before the show started was, how did you come to work at Army Painter, and what is your role there? I know you said it initially, but that played into the question.
So it's actually a funny story. I was working for one of the other paint brands, big paint brands before the Army Painter came around in this industry. And I was doing a bit of consulting work for them with the hopes of having, a full-time marketing job. And it kind of drug its feet and it wasn't working. I went to another show for them and I met Bo, who is one of the two founders of the Army Painter. And Bo is an enigma. He is not somebody that you easily forget. He's one of my best friends. I love the man. But we had just talked, and he was kind of sizing me up because I was the quote unquote enemy, and while there are no enemies, there is competition, right?
Yeah.
We're competitive people. And things weren't panning out, and I don't remember if Bo emailed me or I emailed him, but it was within like 48 hours where it was kind of like I had this conversation, like it's time to crap or get off the pot.
Yeah.
With this other company, and Bo said, "Why don't you come out to Gamma and let's talk?" And there was an opportunity there because they were, like I said, they were very retail focused, and even their online marketing was very retail focused. So there was this whole segment of the population that they weren't reaching, and that was the direct consumer population. So I came in initially as a media director, but the company's obviously evolved a bunch.
Yeah.
And I was tactical promotions executive for a period of time. Now I'm tactical marketing executive. I think that my title is going to change to something with brand or something soon. But what I do at the company and have done is, work with our community outreach, engage with content creators, engage with events, sponsorships, but it's evolved to also, counsel marketing, branding decisions at the company, and product development. So, Bo took a chance and he let Thomas and I work on the air range, and then that delved into Speed Paints and Speed Paints 2 and Fanatic. And while I have less of a day-to-day R&D hand in product development, Thomas and I still work very, very closely, and with our new boss, Ian, who's our chief marketing executive, to bring new products to the market. We've got a lot in the works. It's really exciting. But I get to help be a part of the product story essentially at the beginning, at its inception, and then help share that story with our customers, with the hobbyists that are going to use it. Whether that's our copy, whether that's social media, whether it's newsletters, videos, I get to play with making fun things to tell stories. It's great.
That's always
in a weird way. I'm kind of like the DM of the company.
Okay. No, that's always a good position to have. You know, like I wanted to say personally, I wanted to say thank you. I was really impressed with you at LVO when we met, because like I'm used to, you know, going to, you know, trade shows and stuff like that where people don't remember your name, but like I popped by Friday, met you, we talked a little bit, and then I think you were running around most of the day on Saturday, and that's when I met Kat. She was great, but when I came back Sunday,
awesome.
You actually remembered my name, and that left a huge impression on me.
Well, in fairness, I will never forget a face. But I do struggle with names from time to time. But your name's Lennon. Like, how am I going to forget that?
A lot of people do.
Yeah,
you know, like with me being autistic, I've had to learn over the last couple of years really how to and this is a problem I had all my life up until I was diagnosed. I've learned how to like pay attention to facial twitches, facial features, tonality, and voice to tell like when I'm boring somebody by talking to them. But also, I've learned to read a little bit deeper in that when you're conversing with somebody, you know, if they're genuinely interested in you, like they will remember your name. If they're just kind of like da 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 just to kind of get you, you know, like you go to a doctor and they're trying to get you in and out in 10 minutes, and like they call you George, but your name is actually Susan. You know, it just it says something about character. It says something about the person you talk to. It's like, wow, either they're really good at remembering names, or I actually made a genuine good impression on them, or they were interested in what we were talking about. And it was nice when I came up and said hi on Sunday. And you're like, oh, hey, Lennon, what's up? I was like, oh, that's cool, thank you. And that weekend was an experience, man.
Yeah, LVO was great.
Yeah. Are you coming back in October?
Challenge there. What's that?
Are you coming back in October?
I don't know that I will be there, but the team will be there.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like I said, I'm not always great at remembering names. But you know, you're not hard to forget. So bald guy glasses, goatee, earrings. We talked about your automotive business, and you do Old Hammer. So there's a couple layers there that make you pretty memorable. And it's not to say that anybody else isn't, but we were talking about different things other than just product and answering questions. It wasn't a transactional conversation. I don't like transactional conversations personally. I'm all about relationships. But, you know, it actually is a funny thing. So I started in marketing, and for a period of time, I was kind of a hybrid marketing and sales employee at the company, because we didn't have any sales staff in the States, and it was easy for me to just go to shows. I was the only one.
Yeah.
And I'm talking more like trade shows, industry trade shows. And Jonas, Bo, and I went to my first Gamma with the company. And I think that I was just there to be kind of another warm body in the booth so that they could go take meetings and whatnot. And I believe that's the year that we debuted the tool rack.
Okay. So,
you know, I just asked Jonas, and I'll never forget. I said, like, what's the goal here? Like, give me some parameters. Like, what's our target? And he says, you know, 30, but 25 we'd be happy with if we sold 25 racks this week. Cool. I think I sold 55 the first day and 25 the next. And
nice.
Like, oh, okay. But what they couldn't understand is that, like, they just assumed that I knew everybody in that building, because somebody would be walking down the aisle and I'd be like, ow, you know, how far away is, you know, whatever from blah, 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 blah. Or if they were wearing a Denver Broncos, you know, shirt, I'd ask them, you know, what do they think about the team this year? You know, there are these cues, these social cues that we could very easily pick up on. And it's very easy when we wear a name tag, right? My parents worked in the service industry before I was born. And when we would go out to dinner, which we didn't do very often growing up because we didn't have a lot of money, but when we would, if a waiter introduced himself and said their name, you know, my parents called them by their name. You know, and that's just something that I've carried with me my entire life. If I'm at the grocery store and somebody's helping me at the checkout and their name is Cheryl, I'm going to say, Cheryl, how you doing today? You know, that name tag there is for a reason. And just that little bit of attentiveness could actually mean a lot to people. Yeah. I've had a couple people be like, how do you know my name? It's like, well, you're wearing a name tag. Like, that's what it's there for. And, but I think that just that extra little bit of paying attention as opposed to just being like, oh, here's another person coming to my booth. It means something. It's different. It's I don't know. I think it just shows that we give a S word. We give a crap. You know what I mean?
Well, the thing I found with like in the automotive industry with what I do was I couldn't always remember people's names, but I mean, most of the conversations I had with folks were always online because I didn't really travel much, like setting up a booth. But you know, having the nice thing about being in that industry or now being in the painting world is that you have that instant topic that you can relate to the person on, and it instead of that boring small talk where you're trying to figure somebody out, you have that topic you can instantly dive into, and then when you have a good conversation going with somebody, you know, you start asking about things about them, or they'll mention things about them. So it opens other doors, other avenues to actually discuss and make, you know, like you said initially, or you said earlier in the conversation, actually start building some kind of relationship with the person. And you may not, in person, you may not remember their name, but you actually may remember, oh, this dude really likes, you know, he likes to paint, I don't know, his Space Wolves with like hot pink diamonds, or his Eldar with like, I don't know, black feet and yellow shoelaces. But yeah, you find that one, you click with them and you're like, oh yeah, you're that dude. Oh hell yeah, let's talk some more. And
there's these other characteristics that expose themselves because we have this representation of us that you got to see, right? And then you get to see how that representation, especially like for tournament players, changes when they bring a new army or they change their army. For the longest time when I used to play competitive 40K, and when I played, I think it's gotten a lot better nowadays, but like cheating was rampant.
Oh, really?
And there were whole websites out there to expose it. And then streaming became a thing, and people saw it in real time. And then there became this like bully element where, you know, really, really, really notable players, not all of them, but some of them would bully their opponents. And, you know, to me, I think that's just silly because we are either painting or playing a game with tiny toy soldiers. The people that tend to come to this now Warhammer is different. It brings people from all backgrounds, experiences. You know, I've met more Marines at 40K tables and doctors and lawyers at 40K tables than I have anywhere else in the real world.
Yeah.
But you know, we all probably were into kind of nerdy things when we were kids. We probably all got made fun of a little bit for it.
Yeah.
We probably still get weird questions from our family members at Thanksgiving about those, you know, those little figurines that we like to paint and, you know, so like we have that in common. Like that should bond us. That shouldn't, you know, separate us.
Yeah.
Right? So I always say like this hobby is better when we do it together. Let's not gatekeep. Let's not, you know, let's lift each other up because it's better. The bigger this is, the better it is.
I've never understood the gatekeeping thing. That runs rampant in the automotive scene, and it's like, why? What's the purpose of that? Because you know one thing somebody else doesn't. Like,
it's like hipster culture. Like, oh, I listened to that band before, you know, they had their big album. Well,
yeah,
who cares? Good for you. Like, I like this album better.
So, with the story behind how you came to work at Army Painter. What is the history behind Army Painter and how did it get started?
Okay, so it's a great story. So Bo and Jonas are the founders of the company. Jonas is now retired. Another one of my best friends. Actually just planned a trip. We're going to spend Thanksgiving with him in Italy with my wife and kids. They're going to meet me after our company Christmas party, which is cool. Oh,
that'll be neat.
Yeah, I can't wait. So they both worked at Workshop for a period of time. I think Jonas first in the studio, and they both somehow were in like Northern Europe sales. Bo did marketing for them. And I think GW went through kind of a rough stretch and they had to let go of a lot of people.
Yeah.
So Bo, I think he went trying to figure it out. Jonas ended up starting a game store called The Fanatic.
Okay.
And he had two of them, I believe. I might be getting some of this wrong. A lot of these times these stories have been told, and I've heard it a couple different times. There's usually beverages involved, and it's late in the night. There might be a campfire. But Jonas was working on this product that he was selling, and it was, a common thing for historical gamers, which was basically a polyvarnish wash. You base coat your minis, you dip them in this polyvarnish that was thinned, and you'd shake them off, and boom, your miniatures were painted. And they wanted to do it for wargaming. And he was selling it at his shop, and it was called the Fanatic Army Painting because it did the army painting for you. Somehow either Bo saw it or Jonas went to him and said, do we have a business with this? And they did. So they started with a product called Quickshade, the Army Painter Quickshade. So they changed the name. Instead of the Fanatic Army Painter, it was the Army Painter Quickshade. Now Fanatic has come back, and it was a bit of an homage to Jonas's roots in the company after he retired. And that's what we call our new war paint range. So that's where it started. It was all about helping people paint miniatures faster and easier. That's still a core to what we do. That's a big segment for us. We always want to make sure that it's easy to use and faster or more enjoyable, more fun. I mean, at the end of the day, I have a lot more fun with Fanatic because it's so much easier to use, right? So, but that's kind of the history. It started with Quickshade. It started with a pre-thin poly varnish that they had specifically, formulated for miniatures, sold it into retail stores. There's a great story about how, basically they had started in Europe, and, Europe is a small market compared to North America. And they came to GAMA, which is a big industry trade show, and it was their first time here. And basically, if they didn't open up a distribution account in the United States, they were going to shut down the business. We tried. Okay. And I think that they borrowed money from Bo's wife at the time, Lena, who still works for the company. She was our CEO for a period of time. She's amazing. And they had these nice white shirts made. You probably saw me wearing one of them at LVO. They've got the burgundy collar on the inside, the red stitching, and the logo on it. And they went to GAMA, and back then, 2007, people were still wearing cargo shorts and T-shirts, and, at their booth. And they got laughed at because it's like, this is the hobby and games industry. What are you doing? But Bo and Jonas both instilled this in me very early on. What do you think that guy over there, who's, his shirt's hanging out of his pants and his zipper's undone and he's got holes in his jeans. What do you think his warehouse looks like? Now if it's a stylistic choice, that's one thing. Yeah. But when you're talking business, like if you show up and you're wearing a tailored shirt and you look nice and you're presentable, it says something about the work that you do. Yeah. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about how, building up retailers and building the B2B business first is why we've been as strong as we've been. I think other companies that are coming into the marketplace, they're kickstarting and there's nothing wrong with kickstarting. But when you go all in and you fund it from the beginning and bring it to market and you go to retail first, that's you're doing the long part of the trip first. Yeah. So, I credit them for what they accomplished before I got to this company, because it made it a hell of a lot easier for me to do my job, knowing how strong our relationship was at the business level. Okay. Yeah. It's kind of funny. I was thinking when you were saying like the way that you present yourself, like it must be interesting to deal with so many artists versus dealing with like more business oriented people, because like the one I found that the more successful artists in life, we all tend to have our own look that we come up with, but we give ourselves, if you get into business, you get into the capitalist side of things, because as an artist, you are a capitalist, you're selling your own product. You have to be.
Right? But you also, when you get more successful at it, you learn how to present yourself. So, am I going to, like with the band thing, am I going to walk into the office, like into a deal, like wearing full stage makeup and stuff? No, but I'm probably going to look like I would be at a show, but it's going to be, I'm going to look good. And
you have to dress the part.
Right? Yeah. And, there's a lot of, there's a lot of people that present themselves, they unless you're a multi-billionaire and get away with it, they just never get that part of like, okay, you're also, not only are you like marketing what you make, you're marketing yourself. You have to present yourself in a certain way to people. And yes, you can have your own style about it, but don't show up in a pair of, in a t-shirt and a pair of shorts. Because you're probably gonna raise some eyebrows, and you're gonna have an uphill battle from the initial start.
So I think there's a lot to be said about that, because I've been somebody who's worked from home for going on 14 years, I think.
Oh, wow.
Years. And when I get the opportunity to put a suit on and go to a business meeting, I enjoy it, because I'm wearing shorts right now, and I live in Louisiana, it's hot.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I turned 40 this year, and I care a lot less about other people's impressions of me. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I am who I am, and it's not that I don't care what people think, but I don't care enough to not be who I am and present myself the way I would like to. I still like to put on a suit every now and then. It feels good. And I will when I have to go to a board meeting or something like that. But, Sam, when he joined the factory team, we had this conversation, believe it or not, Sam Lenz. Mm-hmm. If you guys don't know who he is, you should look him up. He is, in my opinion, the best miniature artist in definitely North America, and one of the best in the world. He inspires me every day. Sam is a metalhead. He's a drummer in a metal band. He's an artist. He is a true artist. Mm-hmm. And, he said something about like, I guess I should get like a suit and stuff now that I'm doing this for real. I'm like, only do it if you want to. Like, we're not hiring you to be on this factory team to be somebody else. Mm-hmm. We're hiring you to be you because we like you, So yeah, it's a bit of dressing the part. It's also a bit about being authentic to yourself. Yeah, I think that's, from my perspective, the one thing. I actually had a competitor come up to me at Gamma this year, and it's the competitor that I used to work for. And they have new ownership and a whole new C-suite, and they're like, so what's the secret? And I'm thinking, I'm not going to give you the secret, but I think the real answer is we're authentic. We're not trying to be anybody that we're not. We own up to our mistakes when we make them. We champion our successes when we have them. And we do it and have fun doing it. Yeah. When you work hard, play hard is a motto. That's a real thing at our company. Yeah. It really genuinely is. You should come to our Christmas party. It's out of this world.
Are you going to have Jameson at Christmas party?
They have schnapps, oftentimes homemade schnapps.
No, one of the biggest things that I've learned over the years is just be kind to people. Yeah. Kindness will go a very long way. There was a certain lifestyle I was following for a little while, post a really nasty breakup in 2020, but there was a slogan that I took away from it that is kind of like a mantra in my head. It's stack money, stack muscles, pursue excellence, and I added learn how to be kind. Yeah. Because learning how to be kind to people, especially your customers, and showing them that warmth, it's a difficult thing to do, especially in current society where you have like Reddit, Reddit, Facebook, just people chime in and just say really nasty, horrible things to one another. And it's like, is it that hard just to be nice, or just not to say anything at all? Like, what do you get some jolly off, like, saying something negative about somebody's painting, or saying somebody's wheels look stupid on their car? What's the point? And just being kind to people, I found, works very, very well. It makes you more approachable. It makes you more inviting. People want to be around that, and it's just a good thing to practice.
If there's one thing from any religion that I could take away, it's that do unto others as you would want done to you, right? Mm-hmm. Unto thyself. I travel a lot, and people are just terrible to the employees at airports and flight attendants, and it's like it's not their fault that there was a storm in Oklahoma that delayed the plane.
Yeah.
Right. You know, like they can't change the weather. They're not, you know, but just the littlest things. So I'm with that. There's my new favorite band is a band called Idols. And you know, they are very punk rock, even though I don't think that they like to be called that. But they're anti-establishment in the way that they think that kindness is the thing. Love is the thing. That is like the band's motto. Love is the thing. Unity is everything. And you know, I'm a human being. There are things that piss me off. There's people that piss me off. There's you know, I have emotions. But it's not hard to be kind. Right? Like and you can make somebody's day. You have no idea what somebody else is going through.
Yeah.
You know, it's
you're saying exactly what I kept in my mind in the band scene was like, you know, I was never in the green room. I was always out in the audience, having drinks with people, hustling, you know, giving out our demo CD, stuff like that. And it was like, you know, this person that comes up to me, dude, you're Len at Midnight. That's so cool. It's really great to meet you, and just have a conversation with them, because I mean, you spend 10, 15, 20 minutes with them, you know, chatting or take a shot or whatever you do. You might have just changed this person's life. They might have just been having like the worst day, the worst week, the worst month, the worst year of their life. And now they've had a chance to like talk with one of their favorite musicians. And you might have just had the opportunity to completely change this person's perspective in the world and just change what they were going through, because I mean, you just gave them that little bit of kindness and that little bit of inspiration.
I think it's also, it is easier to be cruel. Yeah.
Yes, very much so.
We see it. And man, this hobby channel is turning into a therapy session. But
that's the great thing about the show, just going off on random tangents.
It's I live by a motto that my grandfather taught me. My grandfather, both of them were amazing human beings. But my grandfather Jack, he told me to consult my brain before I consult my mouth, which I didn't know I needed. It's like you were diagnosed later in life. I was diagnosed with ADHD later in life. And I tell people all the time, you know, when I walk into any situation, I've already probably made the worst joke in my head that is totally inappropriate, that nobody should ever say, you know, or I've thought about the worst possible outcome in any, because that's just the way my brain works.
Yep.
It moves 1 billion miles a minute. And I think that because of that, I'm able to recognize that it's just a lot easier to be nice to people.
Yeah.
Even people that you don't necessarily care for or like. Because what's the point of making somebody else's day worse? Like, does that make your day better? No, it doesn't. But we see a lot of that, like going back to the gatekeeping. And it's that's where I think it comes from. It's instead of trying to reach across the aisle to build a bridge, I'd rather hold on to what I love about something as opposed to putting myself out there. I don't know.
Well, just to kind of roll back into the painting thing, I've got a whole list of questions that I'm curious about. We were going to kind of glaze over the paint thing, because you mentioned that you're really big into using your particular brand. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. There was one big question a buddy of mine asked me that he wanted me to ask you on the show. Is that what are the big differences between the original Army Painter line of paints and now the new Warpainter Fanatic?
So that's a really easy one to answer. So when you look at paint ranges, all of them, and we talked about winners and losers, they tend to be winners and losers. And I don't want to give out too much of the sausage here, but they tend to be winners and losers because of the actual acrylic bases that they use. Different colors traditionally need a different base because they need more pigment. So we think the misconception is that red paints, yellow paints, weak covering paints are weak covering because they don't have enough pigment in them.
Nope.
It's the opposite. You need to put more pigment in them, so you have to take a base because you only have this much space to work with, right?
Yep.
Let's turn this bottle on its side for
Yeah.
a second. This is a prototype of Afterglow, which is in the Fanatic range. So that's a couple years old. So if this is the bottle of paint, this frame that we're looking at, there we go. Sorry, there's a slight lag.
Oh, you're good.
So let's just say that you have your red paint. In order to get like the color to look red, this much needs to be pigment, which means you can't have this much covering agents, right? So you need a base that will allow for that volume of pigment in there.
Yeah.
So many paint ranges use 5, 6, 8 different bases to make their paints. With Fanatic, we only use 2.
Oh.
And they are the 2 highest covering bases that we have accessible to us. So that's the first key difference. So some of the colors that performed really well in the old war paints range utilized those bases, right? Now, how do you counteract those high covering bases? More pigment, right? But I just told you that we can't put more pigment inside this bottle, right?
Yep.
So a traditional paint has 3 basic ingredients, right? A solvent, water, if it's a water-based acrylic. An acrylic, your resin that you're using, that's your binder, your medium. And then pigment.
Yep.
We use liquid pigments. Some companies use liquid pigments. Others use powder pigments, which is fine, but that's where you start to see consistency loss from batch to batch. It's not an exact science. So we had to develop a 4th ingredient, and that is our stabilizer. That is what allows what would normally look like colored liquid dog poo out of an acrylic tube, right? We've all used those artist things before. Maybe not all of us, but anybody who's taken art classes in college or higher level art classes in high school, that crap that comes out of a tube. That's what it looks like when you apply a lot of pigment to a heavy covering base. Yep. That's not fun to use on a miniature.
No.
It's not. So the stabilizer allows us to suspend those pigments in that high covering base to where it becomes an amalgamation. It becomes one thing, which is why it goes kind of back to what you were asking before about the thinner, saying it before about the thinning and the layer glazing, which is why when you use that stabilizer to extend those pigments, it doesn't break, right? Where if you did it with just water, or if you did it with a paint range that maybe used a more gel-based medium, which a lot of yellows and reds do, at a certain point they're going to break. So that's to your friend. What's your friend's name?
That would be RJ.
RJ. That's the key differences.
He was one of my old touring buddies from the band days, and he got into painting orcs. I think about 2 years ago. He's painting up like a 4,000 or 5,000 point army, and he's really big on your paints. And he was curious about that.
They go to one of 2 armies. It's orcs or space wolves.
What's that?
People in bands tend to go to 2 different factions.
Oh, orcs and space marines. Wolves. Okay.
Yeah. Space wolves.
Oh, space wolves
specifically.
No, I saw my gateway drug for 40K was Ultramarines, because they've always been the poster child for 40K. I mean, dating all the way back to Rogue Trader. And
what else?
That was your gateway drug.
I'm a hippie empath. Yeah.
No, with what you're talking about with paints, there's I think a lot of people don't understand about pigment. It doesn't matter what paint you're using. Reds, yellows, certain greens that tend to go more toward yellow. Pinks.
Blues.
The basically warm colors, they are always going to be a thin pigment. That's just the nature of the color. I mean, it's like in audio production to achieve like your bases, it's just you're pumping a lot of air. With high tones, it's really sharp thin air, so that sharp thin air is going to cut right through that big bassy air, so you have to create 3 times the amount of bass to even out with your high ranges. So it's kind of the same principle with paints, is that the warm colors are always going to be a thin pigment. No matter how much pigmentation you, like what you're talking about, you cram in that bottle, it's always going to be a thin color. Whereas like the darker shades, your cool shades, your purples, your blues, your darker browns, blacks, those will always coat insanely well because it is such a rich pigment. It's thick, it coats easily. And the amusing thing was when I did my Blood Angels tutorial, before I added the narration to it, I was showing a spot like I did the base coat with red. It just jumps in. I didn't film the base coat. I just jumped straight into black lining, but I explained the base coat primer, blah, 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 blah. I was black lining, and then there was the next step after that was correcting the black lining by coating over in white. And people were like, oh, you're undercoating your highlights. That is such a great idea. I was like, no, I'm fixing the red, because if you try to paint red over black, you can do it. If when you get more advanced, you figure out how to do it. But for just basic normal painting, no, you undercoat yellows, reds, purples, like lighter purples, yellow greens, undercoat them, your base coat. You know, if you're doing a dark line, undercoat it in white, paint over again. What's your primer color? White. So you're going to wind up with the same color again as you fix those dark lines, instead of blobbing on 5 or 6 coats of a red or a yellow to try and fix spillover of a dark color. And once I added the narration, people were like, oh, okay, I got it now. I was like, no.
The funny thing is I don't blackline anything. Mm-hmm. But what I have been playing with, because I am never going to be a painter who is as smooth can be. Mm-hmm. Go look at Thibaut's, or Thibaut Ram. Like, he is the smoothest painter I've ever seen, and I've held his miniatures in my hand, and I still don't know how he does it. And I make paint, like I don't know how he does it, and I honestly I don't know. And this is not a slight. I don't care to, because I like to paint just like I like to wear the clothes that I want to wear. I like to paint my style.
Yeah.
But I know this about myself, that when I'm painting well, I'm being a bit looser. I'm being a bit more expressive. I'm letting brush strokes show.
Yeah.
And I do always have that urge, because, I was raised in the Mike McVeigh and Citadel studio of painting, that it's got to be smooth. You are right there, but I'm stuck between this balance. I am paradox of a mini painter, because I want to paint smooth, but at the same time, I know that when I don't paint smooth, it looks better. Mm-hmm. So that's my fun little balancing act. But what's really helped me with that is using different unifying shadow tones. And I picked that up from Sam as like a finishing step, but at the preliminary steps and the things that you're probably going to see from the tactical painter in the future is using underpainting a lot more to influence what the actual paint job is going to be like. I think my biggest thing for any established painter out there, now we're getting to advice time, but and I'm nobody to take advice from, but I will say this, I found this beneficial. When you are underpainting, or when you are painting and trying to elevate your painting game, even as an army painter, don't just use black as your undercoat.
Yeah.
I did a whole, you can go look at it. We have something called the Arena of Escalation. It's now called the Arena Challenge to support the Army Painter Challenge, which is a game system agnostic army painting competition. Mm-hmm. Take Golden Demon, take Armies on Parade, mash them together at your favorite events. That's what this is. And we're excited to grow this in the future. But I did a whole World Eaters army, and purple was the undercoat. But I did it in Heresy white and blue, and obviously there was some red skin on Angron, and the red's in there. And just
is that the Angron that's on your Instagram?
Yeah.
Okay.
So having that unifying shadow tone, and then coming back afterwards with the airbrush and just taking a purple speed paint to shoot from underneath.
Yeah.
To bring it all back down. Just doing that as a start will elevate your painting, in my opinion, light years very quickly. So give it a try for you folks at home.
Yeah, it's really been interesting coming back into this and seeing how many classical and traditional art techniques have now bled into miniature painting. Like when I left, it was just
chop is a traditional art technique.
I think that's interesting as hell now, because I forgot who I was talking to about it, but they're like, oh, I hate slap chop. It's such a waste of time. Learn how to paint right. Blah. I'm like, no, it's a great entry level method for people to learn how to paint with. It's a great way of understanding, especially if you're using speed paint or contrast paint. It's a great way to create light on your miniature just by using, black and white. and then coating over it with a contrast or speed paint. And I can actually see the progression now of where people can do that as their initial setup, and then go. Actually, Darcy Bono did it in one of her videos. She did a really good example on orc skin. She's like, if you want to take this even further, go back in with some layer paint and start building up, layers, because and this is something that applies to the print industry. I worked in the print industry for a long time. So you can only saturate white so much until basically with like wide format inkjet printers, you can only get the dots so small and you can only saturate the material so much to create brightness. Whereas when you start adding the layer paints back in, you can build up the brightness up, bring the highlights back up. Holding the orc with the skull.
This was slap chop, other than the skinky guy, because he had to be a little bit lighter because he had a white underbelly. This was slap chop, right? And with some sketching for the highlights after the airbrush zenithal, and then layer painted on top. And it was a commended piece in Golden Demon 2 years ago. Like it's a technique, and I know that there's a lot of people that want to hate on it. And I don't get that, because if somebody finds enjoyment out of it, and it helps them get miniatures painted faster, and for the gamers out there, they're having better looking armies because of it. Why is that a problem?
And people just
because they're not following
find something
the
they don't
sevens. Why?
I've never. I'm starting like. Now getting back into painting, and especially with the gal that I've been dating for the last couple of years. You met her, Pepper, aka Maria. She got your the 50 color box, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
I was trying to show her how to paint orcs, and I was like, I had to really think of what I was doing. But no, I think people, they kind of latch onto something, and then they think a different way of doing it is like, oh, that's wrong. And initially, like, I saw Slap Chop, and I saw the way certain painters were painting. Getting back before I got back into painting again, but I was like, why would you do it like that? But now that where I am with painting, getting back into this, meeting the people I have, talking to the people I have, and also being with Pepper, I've become a lot more accepting of different techniques, different approaches, different ways of seeing things. And one thing I talked about in a couple episodes with people was that I may not like the painting style, but there might be something I can take from that and incorporate into my own workflow, like just a new way of doing metallics or a different way of highlighting armor or something. Just try it out and see how it works for you, and you might find something you like because of it. And it may have, in my head, it's a list of the way I go through things, and then I modify that list with better techniques. And hey, maybe part of that slap chop technique, I used. Like a modified Zenithal style for the 2nd edition box set plastic orc. I did it on his axe shaft, and I just painted it black, brought it up to like a really bright gray, and then washed it down with I think it was Gorgunta fur. Just thinned it out, did 3 or 4 washes of it, just progressively getting darker and darker toward the base, and then by his hand and the axe head, I just mixed in some whatever the black ink is called now. I forgot what it is. But I was like, oh, wow, I normally wouldn't use Zenithal, but for this application, this was perfect. This made painting wood so much easier.
If you have an airbrush, and I know people have strong opinions on it, but I think it's just like everything else, it's a tool. My preferred method, and I've been doing this since before speed paint was a thing, before contrast was the thing, is I will take a black or a dark undercoat. If I'm painting red, I'll sometimes use a dark green undercoat.
Yeah.
If I'm painting blues, and I might use purple for just an example. And then I will dry brush up to an almost gray. I'm sorry, not dry brush. Zenithal to like a gray. And then I'll hit it with an almost white for the final peak Zenithal. Then I will thin down dark tone, and I will wash the entire miniature, basically reestablishing those details, letting those darker pigments run into the recesses, let it dry, come back, and hit the peaks again with that lightish, the lightest gray that you use. I don't use white typically. It's always a lighter gray. And that just smooths out any of the imperfections that you might get from a wash, because washes can be imperfect and you're trying to be fast. Let that sit. Now start slap chopping away. And thank you, Rob, the Honest Wargamer. I know you're a big fan of Rogue Hobbies and Louise. I think secretly she was the inventor of slap chop.
I love how Louise and Peachy always make fun of him for it. Oh, you're the inventor of slap chop. No, I'm not. Shut up. Go away.
Peachy is. We're getting married, by the way. That happened at a
yeah.
Peachy, he out of nowhere we had a group of people at the booth, and he was just being himself, which is the greatest. And I didn't realize how funny Peachy was. Mm-hmm. Like he is funny on Jugs. Mm-hmm. But like watching him when he was at Warhammer, watching him even when he was on the painting phase, even on his own stuff, it doesn't tell the story as to how hysterical that man is.
He seems like the dangerous guy. He's kind of quiet through the conversation, and then all of a sudden he hits you with a zinger like you never saw coming.
He's not quiet by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay.
He controls. He is the sun, and we revolve around Peach. But he had just out of nowhere said that we were getting married. And it was going to be a luau theme.
Oh, God.
Coconut bras and grass skirts. And Mrs. Peach isn't too happy about it. Yeah, he's. I guess that's my claim to fame. I'm getting married to Peachy.
And you got a thing for bald men.
Must be.
Yeah, I've wanted to meet Peachy and Louise. They seem like really interesting people.
They're great people.
I have this running joke that like I can't go a single podcast, like 0 days since mentioning Louise on podcast, or 0 podcasts since mentioning Louise. And the funny thing was the last one I did, it was last minute. The guest I had booked to come on, he was over in Australia and he had something come up, and I was like, oh man, I don't have anybody. Oh, well, I get a day off. And then about 2 hours before, it was like 4:00 here. Kid I had messaged to come on the show back in March. He's like, hey dude, what's up? Can I come on the show? I was like, are you busy this evening? He's like, no. So he came on the show, and amazingly enough, I didn't mention Louise once because none of the topics that came up on the show related to her. I was like, holy crap, I went a whole show without mentioning her. So I would love to shake her hand, say hi to her, have her on the show, talk to Peachy. You know, I'd actually love to sit down and have a couple shots of whiskey with him because I think he gets really silly. And then Rob always seems like the grumpy one.
No, Rob's great. Rob is.
Well, I mean, grumpy in a funny way.
He's great. No, he's not grumpy. I've never found him grumpy, but okay. No, he's great. There was a funny moment where Louise was kind of sitting there and we were watching Chris do his thing, and we were like, she's like, oh, our little boy, he's growing up. I'm like, yeah, I'm just so proud of him. You know, growing up, he's been in this industry longer than both of us combined probably. But no, he is a wonderful, wonderful human being.
I just love how like Peachy and Louise always drag him into things that he doesn't want to be part of on the Jugs podcast. He's like, why are you doing this to me? What I'm just hosting, man. Come on, what are you doing?
Yep.
Going back into a couple more questions, and this is more related to painting. You mentioned Mick McVeigh earlier. Who influenced your painting style?
There's quite a few. And it evolves and it changes, but you know, I joke, and I'm very fortunate that I now get to work with Dave Taylor. He's somebody that I remember, you know, reading about in White Dwarf when I was younger. I got to meet him at my first Nova with the company, and I told him, you know, you were like my childhood painting idol, and I still love his painting to this day.
It's always awesome when he gets to do that.
He's one of them, and I love what he's doing with the Art of series, and he's now the podcast, Bill Paint Play. Him and Jake are a member of the Factory team, so they are a Factory team approved podcast. So Dave is one. You know, I'd be remiss to not mention John Blanche, but I think that's a given. We're all influenced by John. He's the Shel Silverstein of wargaming. I told you about Sam. Sam was one of the first, like, real painters that caught my eye, and one of the reasons why is because he can do army painting too, and there's something very approachable about the way he does it. Caleb Wissenbeck, who I'm very fortunate. He's one of my staff members. Him and Kat from CK Studios. I think he is one of the most underrated painters on planet Earth. He's the best airbrushing artist I've ever seen. He's also one of the best educators I've ever seen. So if you get a chance to take a CK Studios class or catch one of the classes that we're running, as the Army Painter, he could teach anything and people would learn. He is just it's in his DNA to be a good educator. Roman Lapat, I was talking a bit about like the scratchiness and the texture, and Roman, what I love about him is that he is unabashedly himself in what he does, and you see it, and it's not careless but carefree. It's fearless. He's not afraid to show you brush strokes like with intent, and they're supposed to mean something, and there's something so brave about that. And I don't think that I am secure enough to be able to put something on the table in that manner. So I admire him a great deal. Kenny Boucher, I have to be honest. When I got back into it, his tutorials, again, airbrushing, army painting, taught me an awful lot. And Kenny was actually the judge at the first GT that I went to, where I won my first big Best Painted Army award. So that was really cool. I also played him in that tournament. He kicked the ever-loving crap out of me. It was my first stream game, and he beat the ever-loving crap out of me. I think Kenny, if I'm being honest, is underappreciated as a painter sometimes. Because he's such a great marketer, right? And he's such a great presenter that you forget that he is like technically an amazing painter. So I have to give credit to those people. I'm sure that there's more, but if I had my top 5, it would probably be Dave, Caleb, Sam, Roman, Kenny.
Okay.
There's more out there for sure, and I'm definitely missing some. There's more modern painters right now that I'm really enjoying. There's a guy named, I think Diffa Minis on Instagram. He paints a lot of Trench Crusade right now.
Oh, okay.
I really dig his stuff. And I can't not mention Thomas. Man, I am a friend and colleague for saying that. Sorry for swearing.
Oh, you're good.
I've gotten to work with Thomas closely for the past several years, and in a weird way, he's the closest thing I've ever had to a work spouse.
A work spouse.
We butt heads, we disagree, we often agree, but when we disagree, good stuff comes from it.
Yeah,
really good stuff comes from it. We're very good sparring partners in that regard, but he's the one who kind of opened me up, because even though I envied people like Roman and Sam, and I looked at people like Robert Carlson, and these incredible painters that are out there, NRM, Christ, there's so many great painters out there, and I feel like I should mention all of them, but I can't right now. And they've all influenced me, but I never thought that I had any business being in that area, that arena. But Thomas made me believe that I could. And a big part of that was only a couple years ago with, submitting Skiggin to Golden Demon. And I've actually really loved integrating myself into the painting community. It reminds me a lot. I told you, I think I told you I used to ride bikes a lot back in the day. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. It reminds me of the early mountain biking scene. It's very grassroots. People are very supportive. I went and spent, those couple of days before Adepticon with Sam and Tebow just jamming and talking, and I felt like such a fish out of water. Do these guys show each other their Golden Demon pieces before? Is it bad if I ask them? I felt like the kid whose first time at a punk rock show, right? Wants to get into it but doesn't know how, feels uncomfortable. But they're all warm and friendly, and it's a really amazing community to be a part of.
Well, that's one of the biggest reasons I started this show was, growing up here in Vegas, we never actually had an official Games Workshop like branded store. We had retailers, but in the 90s, in the 90s, like you would probably remember this too, is like, Games Workshop Warhammer 40K was really underground. And the only people who talked about it were the ones that went to the hobby store and actually played it or painted the miniatures. And there's always been the unbalanced. The majority of people who are in a 40K play, whereas you have guys like me, we exclusively paint. I've played 2 games of 40K in my life, but the whole point is finding other painters in the 90s was almost impossible. There were very few of us. The few that I found that were like,
you didn't have the internet.
Yeah, we didn't have the, well, we did, but it was in its infancy. But the 2 that I found here in Vegas that I admire most, they became my painting teachers when I was younger. And as time went on, even into the 2000s, finding other people who painted was really hard. And, I left, as I mentioned, I left for 12 years and came back. And, like Instagram is such a great place for painters because you get to do exactly what Instagram is meant to do, show off pictures. And it's a great way to find other painters. And coming back into it, I was really surprised at how warm and welcoming the painting community is. We talked about gatekeeping a little bit earlier. I found maybe 1 or 2 people that gatekeep, but it was painters who were kind of getting near mid level good, and they just seemed like they were insecure. But everybody else I found, like, they're so open, they're so welcoming that just everybody's cool. They want to lift you up to their level and, have conversations with you and hear your stories and you hear their stories and share technique advice. And I mean, LVO, I don't know the guy's name, but he painted up the same squig, the orc on the giant squig. He painted him up and entered him in, he's a European painter. He took like silver or gold for 40K in Europe in 24, or it was early 24. And then he brought it over here along with his little miniature range that he makes. He brought a couple of miniatures that he painted up for that and entered as well. Like the little candle night guy. And I'm just sitting there. I was looking at his models like from a distance. I was like, God, these things are amazing. He's got to be using oil paint. And I bumped into him on the Sunday when we were all collecting our models. He had to go back to Europe on Monday, and he built this custom carrying case on the bottom of his models. He put nutserts in the bottom of them, and he physically bolts them inside of this carrying case, which I thought was a great idea. But I was talking to him. I was like, hey, can I hold your candle night? He's like, yeah, sure, here you go. And I'm just sitting there in amazement staring at it. I was like, this is so good. I'm assuming you use a lot of oils. And he's like, yeah, this is like 90% oil paint. And we chatted for a little bit and just how open, I mean, dude is like top tier, should take a Slayer sword home painter. Yeah. And he was just, there was no gatekeeping. There was like no attitude. There was just like, oh yeah, hey man, come on, let's go get a beer and talk about this kind of attitude. And I think it's so cool.
I think that's kind of the thing, is that art is collaborative, even though it oftentimes is very individualistic. And I think artists are kind of like scientists in that we're always learning. We're always trying to improve. Now, where our hobby is that it's a crossroads of artists and people who do art to participate. And I oftentimes get the sense, and you see it in comments. You mentioned Reddit. I don't go on Reddit because every time I have, it's just been...
The smaller subreddits are fun. The main big ones for 40K, they're kind of a cesspool.
I think it's just because I don't know how to navigate it, so that's probably a part of it. And I also don't have time to have another social media site on my phone or computer. But I find, and I need to be careful how I say this, but it's the truth. I find the people that tend to gatekeep and to shove the way I think it should be around tend to not know as much about it. And I think it's because they're closed-minded. They're closed-minded to new styles, techniques, new ways to do things. And that's kind of their problem, because they never get a chance to learn. Where real artists are constantly learning. Yeah. Constantly accepting criticism. And that's an interesting thing. I've been an athlete my whole life, and I've also been an artist my whole life. And I'm fine saying that now. I don't think I ever was. I used to like to do art. No, I'm an artist. Where in sports, and I think because I played a lot of sports, like I learned how to lose. So receiving criticism is natural. I like criticism.
Yeah.
I like confines, Otherwise, I have no idea where I'm going or what I'm doing.
Yeah.
With painting, with hitting a golf ball, with playing basketball, whatever it is, And I think a lot of artists are in that space that, because you're so isolated in what you do and it's so personal what you are creating, that you have to be open to feedback and you have to be open to new ideas.
Yeah.
So I think that's, kind of no disrespect to gatekeepers, but don't do it.
Yeah.
It's just, like this is better when you can be open to new ideas and new approaches. And
the biggest thing I tell people is like, if you plateau, you've got to figure out how to get off that plateau. And this as an athlete, once you're on that plateau, you're stuck and you need to get outside that box. Otherwise you will not continue improving or learning. And, if you think the great thing we're talking about, you were just mentioning about art is like, there's no mastery of it. Like there is always something new to learn. And like when I was doing music, I was really good friends with Nero Bellum from Cyclone 9, and our initial album, it sounded like a lot like what he would make, or it just, I was pulling influence from so many different people, and Cyclone 9 was one of the biggest ones. But as we went along, like Nero and I hadn't seen each other for a while. He moved here to Vegas, and I hung out with him in like his house studio for a little while. I was helping him with a project, and I played him some of our stuff from our we were trying to do one last album. We've just never gotten to finishing it. But I was playing him stuff from the last album. He's like, dude, I haven't heard any of your stuff in like years. Like, you guys are good. Like, you really have you've gotten into your own, you've branched off and you've done your own thing. Like, this is really good. And it was because at that point, both of us, we stopped listening to stuff that inspired us. Like I for years I didn't listen to industrial music. I wasn't listening to metal music. I was listening to like underground hip hop, mainly for the vocals, the way the lyrics were written, the way it flowed out of the rappers' mouths, and just a lot of house music. And then because we had that experience, we got off that kind of plateau where we got stuck and really evolved into our own thing, because it was like we weren't pulling outside influences anymore. It's like, no, we just need to sit down and write. We just need to write stuff. And when we did, we discovered a whole new level that we never thought we'd hit. And it was because of experimentation. It was because of not pulling influences. It was just, we got off the plateau, we broke out of the box, and we just we leveled up basically. It was really cool. And with painting, it's the same thing. Every single miniature I paint, I learn something new on. It might be something as dumb as mixing in a new color, trying out a new wash, or up to like, oh crap, I just discovered a whole new way of painting blood angels.
I think, you can look at a lot of creative professions, fields, pursuits.
Yeah.
And athletic at the same time. You have to learn the fundamentals. Like there are some people that are really, really good, just naturally gifted musicians, right? Naturally gifted artists. But if you put them in a setting to where they don't understand the technique exactly, they don't understand the why they're doing it, then it's difficult for them to expand, right? To get off that plateau. Sometimes you need to go back to the basics to move forward. Sam says the same thing. I say it, I play golf a lot now. Well, not a lot. I wish I played more. I enjoy it. Like, to me, that is artistry too. The using a stick to hit a ball and making it move, not just far and high, but also low and around. And, that's artistry in and of itself. But if I ever get wily and out of control or lost on the golf course, I just have to go back to the fundamentals. What's my grip look like? What's my stance look like? And painting's kind of the same thing. Like, if you try too hard to do something that you don't have the basic equipment and understanding on how to do, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
You might get some decent results, but that's not repeatable.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, you're explaining what I just went through for the Space Wolves tutorial video.
Yeah.
You know, the biggest word you said was repeatable. I had to, you know, I was doing this for a competition, so there's like a million glaze layers. I'm like, this is not going to make for a good video because people are going to tune out instantly because this is like 30 years of practice. I need to dial it way back. Like, okay, how do I do my blending drills? Okay, so I just do it in the standard, you know, like 4 to 5 layers of layer glazing at most. And the last 2 or 3 is just the final highlights. You know, basically the same stuff that you saw in, you know, 90s grim bright heavy metal painting. And just going back to the basics, I mean, I spent a better part of a month and a half when I was painting Grimnar, just worrying about how am I going to make this into a video form. And I just stepped back and just went back to the basics. Okay, no. Okay, okay, I can repeat this. I did it 3 times. I can now show it in a video. And people will be able to process this, digest this, and it also helped me because it's like, okay, now I can probably refine this and make it look cooler.
There's a couple things in there, and one of them is, and I find this myself doing this in a lot of different aspects of my life, on the golf course, painting a miniature, right? In many different aspects of my life, to be honest. I think this is actually more of a life lesson than it is a painting lesson. But you start doing something, and let's say you're painting a miniature, and you do something really well, and you like the way it looks, and you move on to the bicep. And you try and paint it a different way because you saw somebody else do it that way, or whatever it might be. But the thing that just worked is right there. So why wouldn't you do that here?
Yeah.
But you get so invested into trying to do it this one way, but you're trying to force this square peg into a round hole.
Yep.
And I can't tell you how many times I've done that, and where I'm like, well, I'm getting upset, so I'm going to go back and do it the way that I was doing. And you're like, so why? That's the way you should have been doing it the whole time, right? So like, it's if you're playing golf and the ball starts drifting right, and you know, try and fix it. You're not going to fix it, because you don't have the muscle memory. Right? You don't have the right. So why don't you just aim a little bit left and see what happens? Okay,
so on the various topics we've talked about, we've gone off on tangents, which I think is a lot of fun. But the last question I want to ask you before we go into your Instagram feed is, what advice would you give painters just starting out to help them avoid the pitfalls that you've experienced?
The first one is use a bigger brush than you think that you need to. And get good at it. And clean that brush thoroughly. Never let the paint get into the ferrules. Using a bigger brush is the key to smoother painting. It's the key to prolonged painting. The paint is not drying out on the tips as quickly. You're not getting streaks because the tiny brushes, the Insane Detail brush is a great brush. It's our best-selling brush. I use it for less than 1% of my painting. I tend to use a monster brush. One of our Game Master brushes is low-key a great brush, but our Regiment brush, I use that for 90% of the work that I do. So that would be my number 1 tip. My number 2 tip is to find a color that you really like. Learn how to paint that color really well. And lean into that color. Yeah. Mine was turquoise. Oh. And I get a lot of crap for it. But if there's no shame in leaning into what you're good at. Yeah. You can always try and push yourself, but always have that as kind of a backup. So if you're trying to improve in technique, start with the color that you know best and you're most familiar with, right? If you're trying to go from the Mike McVeigh Old Hammer, layer wash, chunky highlight, extreme high, layer blend. If you're trying to go from that to, I want to do some wet blending stuff, and you drastically go to a color that you're not familiar with or traditionally haven't been good at, you're going to make mistakes. Start with the colors and the paints that you prefer and keep them in your wheelhouse. and use that to, ensure that the end product's going to look good and enjoyable because you like doing it. But also as a fallback plan when things go awry.
You just said something really important. Fun is a big part of it.
Fun is everything. If this isn't fun, why do it?
Yeah, and if you're miserable, you're not going to paint up to the level or expectation you have in your own head. Whereas when you're having fun, it's going to go really fast. You're going to try harder, and you're just going to enjoy the process a lot more.
Yep.
I actually really dig your advice. I really like number 2. That's a really good. Nobody said that before, so that's a really good one. So on that note, let's jump into your Instagram a little bit. We won't make this super long because I know you've got family stuff to attend to.
Oh, they're all asleep by now, so it's just eat some tacos and go to bed.
Tacos. I want tacos. We were talking. We mentioned it a little. Is this the right profile? Yes,
that's me. Yeah, and it's not the Army Painter, but
I accidentally ran across your personal profile, so it was like, yeah. Here was your Angron. This thing is just. I give you credit for painting something that big, dude. That's a lot of work.
I love painting big things. I paint big things better and faster than I do small things. I mean, that's why, in my opinion, the level of painting that you see at 40K tournaments has gotten so much better. It's because Space Marines got bigger.
Yeah, I kind of figured that's why they did that. But
this was fun. This was something. There was a lot of things that I was really ambitious with it. And I had to.
No, there's another Angron in here I was going to try and bring up, but go keep talking about it.
But I, just ended up kind of leaning into what I knew.
Yeah,
I'm really happy with the one of the most pleasing things about this was the way that I magnetized it, so I could take the shoulder pads off and you can see all that musculature because it is.
Oh, nice!
It's such a good mini. I mean, in my opinion. Angron and the Lion are 2 of the best miniatures that Games Workshop's ever put out ever. They're so good. But I am famously a really bad painter of metallics, whether it's true metallics or non-metallics. I've always cheated, especially with Army painting. Like I'll dry brush, stipple, wash, stipple again, whatever. So I'm really happy with how the axe turned out on this. It's actually the first thing that I painted just to start getting into it. There's a couple of things I would do differently, and if I had more time, it was a time constraint thing. But the way that I mixed metallics and acrylics to glaze them down and reinforce the sheen by desaturating the shadow or dulling the shadow, that's something I picked up honestly from Caleb. He's the best metallics painter I've ever seen, at least true metallics painter I've ever seen. I was really happy with how that came out. It was this kind of warmish, coldish, brassy tone, which to me is very World Eaters. I like how you, and the brass, especially on his axe, how you incorporated black into the metallic. That's pretty unique. I haven't seen that very much. Some warm browns and cold grays that are in there. Yeah, and I like the contrast you did on his armor too. You've got the armor plates themselves is blue, which stand out. It's a contrasting color. It stands out really well against how red his skin is. And so you don't have basically the contrasting blue really helps to balance out with the red. You don't have too much blue. You don't have too much red. You've got blue as a secondary color and it balances really well. It's just as loud as the red. So the honest to goodness answer to this is that I knew I wanted to do a Heresy era scheme. So all of the other units are white armor, blue shoulder pads. Yeah. Knowing that Angron the Red was going to be red, and I wanted him to be ferociously red. I mean, there's some of our fluorescence mixed into the reds and the orange. Yeah, I was going to ask how you got it that bright. Our fluo paints are awesome. They're sleeper paints. The airbrush fluorescents are the best fluorescents in the market. Nice. And the Fanatic effects fluorescents are a good complement to them because they almost behave like a speed paint or a wash. So you can use them interchangeably to do different things. Yeah, I haven't messed with fluorescents yet. Like a Pro Acryl has some. I noticed you guys had some. I haven't gotten to play with them yet. But guy I had on 2 shows ago, he's like god tier good. And he was using some fluorescents with his Necrons. And he's like, you should give them a shot. They're really cool. Yeah, they're amazing. And talking about your, what's a fry me? Miniature
or strange people when they comment a post. They're supportive and full of advice.
My assistant tagged me in that. Thanks, Alan.
Oh, Fry. Oh, and I noticed you were messing around with a bust.
Yes.
I painted my first 2 busts this year. I'd never painted a bust before, and God, they're fun.
They're a lot of fun, but it's a great exercise, and I think people that are trying to get better at like miniature painting, miniature painting, they should experiment on a bust, because
definitely.
Everything that you were trained, there are some things that remain, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
And I honestly, one of the pieces, so this piece is transitioned a lot from these very early, like undershadow, highlight, weird.
Did you have any complete pictures of him?
No, he's not done.
Oh, okay.
Because I had him with me at Adepticon.
Oh, okay.
And I showed it to Roman, and in the kindest way says, "You're painting this like you would a wargaming miniature." I suggest going to Mindwork and finding they have a smaller version of this, the academic size, and getting it. So I went down, and the guys at Mindwork are great. Their miniatures are insane quality. They work with IP from other artists and lore. And this is Red is what his name is. This is one of the coolest miniatures I've ever seen. But Roman just said, get the academic one, work on the smaller version first, and kind of work your way up, which is his kind of way of saying it's crap.
So hold on, tell me what your favorite faction is, and why is it elves?
So it's in fantasy, it's elves. It's specifically wood elves.
Yeah.
I like the idea of protecting a forest. I like the idea of bonding with nature, and that they've always been. Wood elves were my draw. In 40K, I've played everything. Lamenters are my favorite chapter. I have my own chapter. I'm really actually like reading into Angron's lore. I really like him. I have an emotional tie to his character. I used to work with drug addicts, and it's this the common misconception that people that are suffering with addiction are just terrible people. They're usually they've suffered a great deal of trauma. Angron met his dad, and then his dad blew up his planet that he was trying to save. I'd be pretty pissed too.
Yeah.
It's just so I've really fallen for Angron's story. So World Eaters are up there in the 40K side, but
before we close I want to get to your World Eaters, but before we close this, the one thing I really enjoyed about the bus was how much room I had to work. And when I sat down and started that Tau, I did a skin first, and I got to incorporate using back in the 2000s when Games Workshop revamped the Space Wolves line. They did a painting guide in a white dwarf, and they're to shade the armor, instead of using a darker blue, they were using browns. Yep. And I tried it on a few Space Wolves. I didn't like how it looked, but I got to try that method. I was like, I need something to shade. It's I base coated it with dark blue, was using your Runic Cobalt, your Frost Blue, and I think some Pro Acryl White to kind of bring his face up. And I was like, I need to start shading this down with a opposing color, a contrasting color. So I used I bought AK Red Rust because it mimics the old Citadel terracotta that I'm so used to. And I started blending that in and actually using that method for what they were doing in Space Wolves. And it was so much fun because, one, there was so much room to work. Oh, is that Warpainter terracotta?
That's the John Blanche Ruddy Terra.
Oh, okay.
So good.
It was so fun to use that. There was so much room to work, and especially if you're into layer glazing, busts are so much fun to use that with, because you can start really gravitating toward the realism side and get those just luscious, gorgeous gradients that are really kind of hard to pull off on something that's only 28 millimeters. You can go full force on, this dude, he's 50, 60 millimeters big, and it's only just a certain section.
It also becomes more important that you focus on volume and light source.
Yeah. Yeah. You need to divert attention
more. Yeah.
There was your test for your World Eaters shoulder pads, I think.
That was my because I'm famously bad at metals. That was my like, how can I do something that feels like I painted it, but isn't terrible.
That looks gorgeous.
I enjoyed it. So, I mean, it's for that army, I just used a Cultist Cloak speed paint to box in the trim after I did all the other painting. That was kind of like my uniform. Let's repaint this. And I like using speed paints for that as opposed to just a black paint because it allows some of the definition to still show.
Yeah.
So especially if you're using an airbrush or you're stippling like I did here, you can still see where some of the light direction is coming from previous, but it's dark enough to cover it down.
Yeah.
So I went right into Night Sky, a cool dark gray that's in that desaturated gray blues family that you love to play in. Then to, I believe it was Cobalt Blue Metallic, just to add some scratchy stuff, played with that desaturated blue. Then to True Brass, which is a low-key, amazing color from the Fanatic range. To add that brassy feel to it, to warm it back up.
Yeah.
And then I use Warrior Skin, which is another speed paint, to glaze and feather and bring back the warmth. So I think why this worked is it was that play from cool to warm.
Yeah.
But, not too drastic.
No, everything about it. I mean, this is just a simple shoulder pad, but just everything about it is really good. I like how bright and bold. I mean, everything is all over it, but I like the incorporation of the browns back into the metallics again, which really gives it that warm feeling of being a metallic. And it's, like what you had with the silver and the black, you had the cold feeling, but you brought the tan in or the brown, and it really helped bring it. It really finished everything off.
It gives that blue something to pop off of.
Oh, your World Eater rhinos. Those are neat.
Those are so fun to paint.
Tanks
are the best. I could paint 100 tanks in a week.
Oh, there he is. I wanted to talk about this guy. I thought this was super cool.
This is straight up stolen from El Miniaturista, Juan Suar. I can't remember his last name. And I asked him, I was like, I need to steal this because it's backwards painting. At least the Juggernaut is.
Yeah.
You're taking a black miniature, you're applying some like thin down white into the recesses where you want, then airbrushing those out, and then applying your fluorescence, and then you're basically dry brushing over top of that and going back with the airbrush to kind of fill in. And then I did all my edging with stipples and light edges with metallics on the black to make it look worn. It's so easy to do. It's not even funny.
Yeah, I just you called it painting backwards. I really dig the orange glow around all the armor pieces. That just looks so cool. You actually you did it completely different than I had thought of in my head. Is I would just go ahead.
Completely backwards.
I would just I would do the white base coat, but then I would just glaze in I would just start glazing in brighter oranges over the black into the white, and then just keep building it up. And at the very end of it, I would take some orange and mix it in with some white, and then just pinstripe again around the deepest recesses. Like actually just thin out, almost make it a wash.
This takes about 30 minutes, but that probably takes you how many hours?
It'll probably take me about a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've kind of got like my Blood Angels I've gotten really fast with, but it's because I've painted, since I started painting them again, I've painted up probably a good 20 or 30 of them. And now that I've refined my Space Wolves, I think I can get faster with that. But never in my mind, I don't really ever think about speed. So it's always interesting to hear methods like such as yours where, it would take 30 minutes to an hour, where this would take me probably, the better part of a week to do. It's like,
that's Army Painting in a nutshell. Army Painting is, and in the Army Painter Challenge, there is a clear criterion for judges to reward points for cheating, essentially. Like Army Painting is cheating. You are maximizing impact with as few strokes as possible. And there are clever ways for and everybody has their own ways. But I love that. Like how much impact can I make in as few strokes as possible. And it's a hard thing to do when you're also like a perfectionist and you want to get the smoothest blends sometimes. But it is so rewarding when you can just take this thing that was gray and turn it into that in next to no time at all.
Yeah. My mindset has always been one of my biggest influences was Kim Seiberg and the Space Wolves that he did in the 90s. That's who, like him, McVeigh, and Tim Prow. I actually had Tim Prow on a couple weeks ago. Those were my three biggest influences. And, when I saw those Space Wolves that McVeigh or that Seiberg did, he painted his entire army to the same exacting standards of like basically put this into Golden Demon for an army, take home a Slayer sword because everything is painted to like Slayer sword quality.
Right.
So that's where my brain has always been. And the idea of, I started a Space Wolves army in the 2000s, and I dialed down my painting to get them all done. I never finished them all, but I look at them in my case now, and I'm like, I can't do that again. I have to do it like to my best standard. And I see these guys, you doing something like this, or guys knocking out entire armies in like a couple of weeks. I'm just like, I wish I could let myself do that.
But you kind of have to break free to do it, because you gotta cheat. You gotta take steps away.
But then again, I don't play. I just paint individual models, whatever. Usually, unfortunately, I've been stuck in painting Space Marines because that's what, I'm in competition mode right now because 3 competitions in a row, June, September, and October. And after September or after October, I have to go into painting Christmas gifts. This is cool. This is so cool. I know it's a video, but
I did that awesome. That was a one night project where I sat down after a long period of travel and just said, I'm going to lock in. My wife was out of town, put the kids to bed, and it was just a few hours, I think.
Bro, what am I doing with my life? That thing is killer. Yeah, I like how you've got the good the amazing orange pustules contrasting against the sick green skin.
The fluos are fun, man.
I love Games Workshop's Nurgle army now. Like even fantasy versus 40K, they're just both.
Yeah, they're great.
They're just awesome.
They're amazing canvases to work on because it allows you to play with volume, right, and texture.
Yeah. Well, the neat thing is, like, it's kind of gone back to, like, in 90s Nurgle, like, when they brought out the monopose Plague Marines, the box art was, they got back into doing, like, all the leaking pipes and all, like, the decay and stuff like that, and then that kind of went away, but it's nice to see that coming back through independent painters.
Yeah. Just
bringing, the whole point of Nurgle is rot and decay, and seeing stuff like this is just like, whoa. Did you see the gigantic Great Unclean one that I can't think of his name right now. Him and his wife built it. He's a really famous YouTuber. I can't think of his name, but the thing is, like, it's 28 inches tall.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Why can't I think? Not Miniscape, not Minisode. Midwinter Minis.
Oh, Midwinter. Okay.
Did you see that?
I didn't see that one.
Oh, dude! No. Like, he documented the entire process. It took like almost, I think, like a year and a half. But
Holy
that
cow.
video series is the amount that he got into it was nuts. Yeah, you look like you're fading fast, so we'll just talk about one more.
It has been a long day.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it. Oh, you were working on the lion.
Yeah, it's still sitting over there. I haven't touched it in a while. The cape on him was really fun.
Yeah.
And I was happy with the direction, and sorry for like the pinked out whites. I think I just had some pink on my palette, and I was trying to add a base coat for it just to bring it all back. Mm-hmm. Nothing intentional there, but the cape was a lot of fun. Just playing, using, and this was, I believe we were still in development of Fnatic. Mm-hmm. And the purples and blues on there were from the first set of 12 that Thomas sent me to play with. But that is a combination of speed paint and Fnatic paints. I love using speed paint to push the saturation of things, almost like you would in ink. I love the new formula because of how versatile it is.
I made the mistake.
So much with it.
I made the mistake of licking my brush with speed paint on it.
Yeah, they don't taste good.
No. I was assuming they were going to taste like Citadel's contrast paints, which taste like their old inks. Nope.
No, sir.
I was teaching Pepper to paint a little bit, and I accidentally tipped my brush with speed paint on it. And she's like, I'm assuming that doesn't taste good. I'm like, give me my beer. That was a mistake. No, this is. I really like what you did with the shield too. Like, and for non-metallic metallic, this is great. I'm
not good at it, but I was pretty happy with where I was going on this one.
You ain't got to be so humble about it.
I was getting there. No, I'm not. It's a known truth. And I'm very happy with where this was going. I could tighten it up a bit, but I like where it was going.
I like the greens you got going on here.
Thanks.
Yeah, so we will wrap this up because, like I said, you're looking like you're about ready to conk out on it. So we'll
it is 9. I go to bed normally at 8:30.
Oh, okay, my bad.
It's 41 minutes past my bedtime. I
forewarned you at the beginning of the show when we were talking. This is the end of the show. So is there anybody you'd like to shout out? Keep in mind, I wrote down almost every name that you said.
Yes, I want to shout out Bo Penstoft and Jonas Faring for giving me the opportunity to work for this company and taking a chance with me. My homies at the Army Painter, y'all are awesome. Thanks for putting up with me every day. It's a lot of fun. To my daughters Zoe and Ray and my beautiful wife, who's probably going to be angry that I'm coming into bed when she's sleeping. I love you guys. But no, to everybody out there, to everybody on the factory team, and everybody watching, everybody that comes and sees us at the events and uses our products, shout out to you.
I will say thank you, and shout out to you for making a great product.
Thanks.
So I have to say thank you very, very much for taking time out of your day to come on the show. I know you're insanely busy, and like we had to reschedule for this, but thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, sorry about that, by the way.
Oh, you're fine, dude. No, it was an honor getting to know you better and just to nerd out with you for a little while.
Yeah, dude.
So
keep painting awesome old hammer stuff.
I plan on it. Like, I'm looking forward to actually seeing you guys again in October. If you're there, I'll come up and say hi and give you a handshake. And if not, I'll say hi to Kat when she's there. And hopefully, going forward, we can do some cool stuff together.
Awesome. And I promise if I'm there, I'll remember your name.
Sweet. I appreciate that. All right. Thank you guys for watching. Here's a few more of my videos. I have more podcasts coming out. And hopefully by the time you watch this, the bottom video is my Space Wolves tutorial. I'll talk to you guys in a bit. Thanks.